I just wanted to share a poem with you, which is actually a poem which was actually written by an 11-year-old girl. And it was just some of her observations about the world we're living in. And I just wanted to share that poem with you, but if I could ask all of you to maybe just close your eyes, just relax. And I'm just going to read this poem to you. I want you to try and just forget about all the pressing duties that you have, and just try to soak in some of the words and reflect and see how they apply in your life. So this is the poem that this 11-year-old girl wrote. The paradox of our time in history is that we have taller buildings but shorter tempers. We have wider freeways but narrower minds. The paradox of our time is that we buy more, but we enjoy less. We have bigger houses, but smaller families. We have more conveniences, but less time. The paradox of our time is that we've conquered outer space, but not inner space. We have more experts, but less solutions. The paradox of our time is that the world is smaller than ever before, but people are further apart. We lose our health to get wealth, and then we spend that wealth to try and get our health back. We've multiplied our possessions, but we've reduced our values. The paradox of our time is that we've added years to life, but maybe not life to years. We plan more, but accomplish less. These are the times of fast food and slow digestion. Big men, but small character. Steep profits, but shallow relationships. Just reflect on that for a few moments. It's all very true. It's amazing how sometimes someone so young who's not part of the system, as it were, has such an amazing perspective that maybe many of us who are just in the treadmill of life fail to see. And it's all, if we pick out some of the lines of the poem, it's all very true. I mean, she writes, we've conquered outer space, but not inner space. And I was reading on the news that last year NASA spent $15 billion on space travel. But at the same time, in the US of A, the pharmaceutical industry is still the biggest industry, and the most prescribed drug in the United States is, it's the Department of Health, so I'll ask you, Prozac and antidepressants. Right? It said that in America, nearly 1 in 3 people have a psychiatrist. So maybe we've conquered outer space, but maybe not inner space. It's interesting, actually, in 1969 when they landed on the moon. Then a television crew were going around and interviewing different people to see what their reaction was to the moon landing. So everyone was very excited and very, ecstatic at the news. And then finally they came to one Buddhist monk, and they said, man has now landed on the moon. And what is your response? Like, what do you think about this? And he said, this is actually the darkest day in history. Which was like, so they had to take the camera off him. They didn't want to spoil the the mood. And then they said, what do you mean the darkest day in history? And he said, now man is looking further and further and further outside of himself to find some happiness. But actually we have to look further and further and further within ourselves. Which was a nice thought. So yeah, she writes, we've conquered outer space, but maybe not inner space. She writes, we have more experts, but less solutions. There was a study, and they were finding the main problems that are there in schools that children go to. And they said, 50 years ago, do you know what the 3 biggest problems in schools were? Chewing gum under the desks. A little more serious than that was talking in class. And if you're a really bad kid, then you cheated in exams. Those were the 3 biggest problems in schools 50 years ago. Chewing gum, talking in class, and looking at someone else's exam paper. And then they said, what are the 3 biggest problems in schools now? Gun crime, teenage pregnancy, and physical assault of teachers. It's quite interesting that maybe our educational and academic standards have increased. Maybe we have more people who are expert in many, many different subject areas that we never knew anything about 50 years ago. But still, are we developing character? Are we developing values? Maybe, as she writes, we have more experts but less solutions. So very, very interesting insights. She writes, the world is smaller than ever before, but people are further and further apart. And it's very interesting, they call the world now a global village, in the sense that technology, phones, internet means we can connect with people very quickly. You can connect with someone on the other side of the world like that. And in that sense, we're all very close together. They say every day 400 billion email messages are sent. Yeah. And we're all responsible for some of those. So every day 400 billion email messages are sent. They said if Facebook were a country, it would probably be the 3rd or 4th biggest country in the world. That's how many people are on Facebook. So we're using technology to connect with people like never before. Yet people are feeling more lonely than ever before. Right? How many of us even speak to our neighbors? How much quality face-to-face interaction do we have with other people? Like this, people are actually feeling very isolated in the world we're living in. And therefore, actually, the World Health Organization is saying that within the next 5 years, the most widespread illness won't be cancer, it won't be heart disease, but it will actually be mental illness from people who are not finding actually genuine love and connection in their relationships with others. So we can see that life maybe has become a lot more fast, life has become a lot more complicated. I saw an advert recently where it said, life was much simpler when apples and blackberries were just fruits.